They told me there was no room for me at the party, but my fiancé made room for his ex. That sentence replayed in my head like a cold blade. A spacious cabin in the woods, a place once filled with laughter and meals I had prepared for the whole family, had now become a place where I was not welcome. I remember so clearly his indifferent gaze when I asked, "Are you sure I should stay home?" He just shrugged, not bothering to look me in the eye, and replied curtly, "Yeah, it's going to be crowded. You should stay home and rest. You'll be more comfortable." The air in the kitchen that day was suffocatingly silent. I sat in front of him, my hands still smelling of soap from washing the dishes, but I felt as if I didn't exist in that room. He was looking at his phone, not at me. His nod was like a final, cold, and brutal period at the end of a sentence. I remember telling myself I wouldn't make a scene. I didn't want to be the girlfriend, or one day the wife, that everyone called dramatic. I told myself to stay calm, not to react, to just let it go. But the moment I opened my phone and saw the photos on social media, my composure shattered. In the picture, he was sitting close to a woman I knew all too well. Danielle, the woman his family still called by an affectionate nickname, as if she had never left. His arm was draped around the back of her chair. His dark red flannel shirt, the one that had been a memento between him and me, was now on her shoulders. The warm golden light of the cabin illuminated her face, her bright smile, her sparkling eyes. I looked at it again and again, my heart aching with each glance. What was worse wasn't just her presence. It was the other faces in the photo. His sister, his cousin, the same people who had asked me to cook dinner or clean up after parties. They were laughing, raising their glasses, their eyes on Danielle as if she were a part of the family, and I had never existed. In a short video, he was the one who stood up, raised his glass, and said, "To old times." Everyone laughed and clinked their glasses. The sound of their cheers seemed to completely erase the empty space where I should have been. Where was I in that picture? At home, alone, looking at a pile of damp, unfolded laundry and leftover food containers. It was a 4-hour drive, but in truth, I had never felt so far away. If you have ever been excluded from a place that was supposed to be your family, you will understand this feeling. I'm sharing these details so that anyone who sees themselves in this can leave a comment below. I want to know how you dealt with being made an outsider in your own story. I used to think that marriage or an engagement was about entering a new family, being accepted, being loved. But that day, I realized my place was just an empty chair, easily replaced. They didn't need me, and he chose silence instead of defending me. After that party, they posted more photos. A boomerang video made me shudder. He was pulling out a chair for Danielle, a gesture I had never received. The sound of laughter from those around them, and his comfortable gaze on her, was a confirmation. I wasn't there, and they didn't miss a thing. I didn't scream, I didn't cry, I just sat in silence, my eyes glued to the screen. A coldness spread through my body, and I felt as if I had just walked out of a house and had the door slammed shut behind me. I had been completely neutralized. You might be thinking, why didn't I call him right then? Why didn't I get angry? I asked myself the same thing, but then I realized that anger would just make me look irrational. My silence, on the other hand, would force him to confront his own choices. And in that silence, I received a text from an unknown number. "Don't believe them. The cabin was never full. You should see all the pictures from tonight." I held my breath. I didn't know who the sender was, but every word was like pouring gasoline on the fire in my heart. If you followed me this far, you probably understand why I have to share this. I know there are people who have experienced a slow, simmering betrayal in a relationship they thought was solid. If this story touches you, I hope you'll follow the channel so you don't miss what I'm about to tell next. Not just to hear my story, but to know that you are not alone in this pain. I sat there, staring at the brightly lit screen filled with the laughter of strangers, and for the first time, I no longer felt like a woman about to be married. I was just a name crossed off a list, an empty space that had just been filled by his past. And from that moment on, I knew this wasn't just a party I had been left out of. This was a warning of everything that was still hidden. I met Ethan, the man I called my fiancé, when I was 26. He wasn't the type of man I usually went for. Not flashy, not loud, with none of the romantic gestures you see in movies. He was simple, steady, and worked in the HVAC industry, always exuding an air of reliability. At the time, I thought I had found a solid shoulder to lean on. I didn't need a glamorous man. I needed someone stable, someone who would be there if I fell. In the first few years, he was exactly that. We had simple dinners, small picnics, and afternoons spent at a coffee shop. Ethan wasn't a man of many words, but his eyes were warm then, and they made me believe I had been chosen. But there was one shadow that never disappeared. Danielle. She was his ex-girlfriend. Every year at family gatherings, I would hear her name. People said she had cheated on him, had left him heartbroken. Yet, she never truly vanished from his life or his family's. At first, I tried not to mind. I listened to his explanation. She's my cousin's best friend. They grew up together. It's hard to avoid her. I would nod and try to be understanding. I thought I should be mature, that I should trust him. But with every holiday, every party, I saw it clearly. My place was always on the periphery. The first year after we got engaged, there was a birthday party for his mother. I had baked a cake, written a card, and was waiting to give my well wishes. But when I walked into the room, Danielle was already there. She was laughing and talking, standing next to Ethan as if she had never left. Everyone was gathered around her, asking questions, reminiscing. When I set the cake down, no one even looked over. I still remember his mother's indifferent gaze, a quick nod, before she turned back to her conversation with Danielle. Another time, just after we had finished planning our wedding, Ethan proposed to me on a quiet evening in the park. I had tearfully accepted. But that very weekend, at a family party, Danielle was there again. His sister pulled her into the circle to dance, while Ethan just stood there laughing, a beer in his hand, not saying a word to introduce me as his fiancé. In that moment, I realized I had agreed to be the wife of a man, but I had never been accepted as a member of his family. I still remember asking him once, "Doesn't it bother you that she's always here?" He just sighed. "Honestly, there's no reason to ban her. Everyone knows her. Don't worry about it so much." I sat in silence, trying to swallow the lump in my throat. I chose to believe him, to believe that time would change things. But time didn't erase the truth. It only etched it deeper. In his family's eyes, Danielle was the daughter-in-law who had never been lost. I was a rough draft, a strange name that had wandered into a picture that was already complete before I arrived. Have you ever been in a situation like that? Sitting among people who are supposed to be your family, but their eyes clearly tell you you're a stranger? If you have, I want you to leave a comment so that others who are listening can see they are not alone in that coldness. I had done everything to bridge the gap. I cooked their favorite dishes. I cleaned up after parties while everyone else was still talking. I gave thoughtful birthday gifts. But every time, their eyes would just glance past me and return to Danielle. Even though she was no longer his girlfriend, they still called her by an affectionate nickname, still talked about trips and memories that I was never a part of. I realized that the injustice wasn't in a single party, a single encounter. It was in the collective attitude of treating me as if I were transparent. Every averted gaze, every dismissive comment, every laugh when Danielle told an old story, it was all a series of small, slow, and constant cuts. Ethan was different. He didn't openly side with her, but his silence was complicity. Instead of putting me at the center of his life, he chose to be silent to keep the peace with his family. And with that silence, he pushed me out the door more than once. As the months went by, I learned to swallow my tears when I heard Danielle's name. I learned to pretend I didn't care when I saw her in their group photos. I learned to tell myself, they'll accept me eventually. But every time I thought that, reality would slap me in the face. I used to believe that becoming his wife would change everything, that once it was official, his family would have to accept me. But more and more, I understood that some places are never meant for you, no matter how hard you try. Everything I had been through was just a prelude to the harsher truth that was waiting for me at that cabin. And I didn't yet know that the crowded space they used as an excuse was really just a door to push me out and to make room for the person I thought was in the past. 2 days before the trip, I got a text from Ava. Ethan's sister. It was just a few lines. The cabin is a bit tight this year. Sam's friend is bringing a few people. You should probably stay home so everyone can be more comfortable. Hope you understand. I read it 3 times. It was brief, polite, but ice cold. No apology, not a hint of remorse. As if I were just an extra piece of furniture that needed to be moved aside to make room. That evening, I showed the text to Ethan. He glanced at it, then put the phone down on the table without looking me in the eye. Yeah, it's really crowded this year. You should stay home and rest. It'll be more comfortable. Oh. His voice was calm, without a moment's hesitation, as if he had long since accepted that I wouldn't be there. I sat in front of him, waiting for him to object, or at least to offer a word of comfort. But all I got was a cold silence, his eyes on the television screen instead of me. The room was heavy with a quiet tension. I could hear the clock ticking, the sound of his spoon against his cup. I tried to swallow the lump in my throat and then forced a nod. Okay, I guess I'll stay home then. He didn't say anything more. He just stood up and walked into the bedroom, leaving me sitting in an empty space. The day they left, I stood at the window and watched his car pull away. I wanted to believe that it was all a coincidence, that the cabin was really crowded. But deep down, a voice whispered, "They just needed you to disappear." That evening, I tried to keep myself busy. I did the laundry, cleaned the house, and made myself a simple meal. I put on an old movie, but I couldn't remember the plot. The apartment was so quiet that the sound of my spoon hitting my bowl was jarring. I felt like I was living in a parallel universe. Somewhere, everyone was gathering, raising their glasses, while I was left behind, completely meaningless. I told myself, it's just one trip. But I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. And then, at midnight, my phone buzzed. An unknown number, no name. The message was short. Don't believe them. The cabin was never full. You should see all the pictures from tonight. I sat up, my heart pounding. Who would send me this? A family member? Someone who knew what was going on? Or someone who wanted me to find out? My hand was shaking as I opened my social media app. The first photo that appeared was a group of people around a dinner table, their wine glasses raised. In the center of the photo, Ethan was sitting next to Danielle. Her smile was radiant, and he was leaning in, his arm draped around the back of her chair. I swallowed hard. The dark red flannel shirt on Danielle's shoulders was a direct hit. It was the same shirt I had washed for him, the one he had worn on our beach trip. Now, it was on someone else. The next photo was even worse. In a short boomerang video, Ethan was pulling out a chair for Danielle. She sat down laughing, and the sound of cheers from those around them was audible. A simple gesture, but it was something he had never done for me. I scrolled through more photos. Not a single one of me, of course. I wasn't invited. But the emptiness wasn't just from my absence. It was from the replacement. Danielle was sitting in the very chair that had always been mine, right next to him. The captions were suffocating. Family forever, Konanya. Couldn't ask for a better crew. Cheers to old times. I dropped the phone on the table. The room was dark, except for the glow of the screen. I sat there, feeling as if I had just been pushed underwater. I was no longer Ethan's fiancé. I had never been a part of that family. The person they had chosen from the very beginning had never been me. And in that silence, I knew one thing. This wasn't just about a crowded cabin. This was a setup, and I would have to dig deeper to find out the whole truth. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, the image of Ethan sitting next to Danielle would appear. The shirt on her shoulders, the radiant smiles of the group, and the way his eyes tilted toward her, it was all a verdict. The next morning, I opened my phone again. The photos from the cabin were flooding in. They were constantly updating, as if they wanted to show off their joy to the world. In every picture, Danielle was at the center, a photo by the fireplace. He was sitting close to her, his hand casually resting on the back of the couch. I knew that gesture. He only did it when he felt intimate, and this time, it wasn't for me. A short video made me catch my breath. In it, Ethan stood up and raised his glass. To old times. The room erupted in cheers, glasses clinking. They were celebrating something beautiful, but I was never a part of those old times. I let the phone fall onto the pillow. My heart was pounding, not with a burst of anger, but with a creeping, overwhelming coldness. I had been excluded, replaced, and worse, everyone had agreed to it. Just then, another text from the unknown number arrived. This is just the surface. If you want to know the truth, pay attention to the way he looks at her. I opened more photos. And just as the message said, it wasn't just the public actions, but the small, accidental moments caught on camera. The way Ethan's eyes would follow Danielle when she laughed. The way he would lean in when she was talking to Ava. The way his hand would rest near her chair, as if by habit. I felt like an outsider, spying on their real life, a life in which I didn't exist. On the second day of the trip, more photos appeared. The group hiking, having breakfast, taking selfies by the lake. Ethan and Danielle were always close. In one picture, she was wearing a baggy hoodie, and I recognized it as the one he usually wore at home. I no longer had any doubt. She was reliving her memories with him, and I was just a ghost on the outside. That evening, I saw a photo of the group in the cabin's living room. The warm yellow light, the laughter. Danielle was leaning back on the couch, and Ethan was leaning in to whisper something in her ear. The photo wasn't taken head-on, but it was clear enough to see their intimacy. I sat in silence, my mind blank. I didn't cry, didn't scream. I just felt a crack spreading through me. The thin veneer of my trust had been shattered, revealing a truth I had always avoided. I had never been his first choice. That night, I tried texting Ethan. "Is everything okay?" The message showed as seen, but there was no reply. 1 hour, 2, then 3. The phone remained silent. I imagined him sitting with them, laughing, not even bothering to remember I existed. When he came back, I decided to stay silent and observe, not to confront him right away. I wanted to see how he would act and let him reveal the truth himself. That night, I lay in bed, my eyes wide open in the darkness. I could hear the distant sound of cars, the bark of a dog outside. But in my heart, there was only one sound: emptiness. The emptiness of a chair that was supposed to be mine, now filled by someone else. If you have ever felt excluded from a story in which you were supposed to be the main character, you will understand what I'm talking about. I know there are many people out there who have had to witness a public betrayal and could do nothing. If you see yourself in this, please subscribe to the channel. Not just to hear the rest of my story, but to know that you are not alone in a pain that feels so hard to put into words. The next morning, I received another text from the unknown number. "He will never choose you, but you can choose how this ends." I put the phone down and took a deep breath. For the first time, I didn't just see myself as a victim. I saw myself at a turning point. And I knew, from here on, things would never be the same. Ethan came back late Sunday afternoon. The car pulled up, and he got out with the relaxed air of someone who has just had a great vacation. When he walked in, he dropped his bag on the floor, took off his shoes, and then looked up at me as if nothing had happened. "I'm back. Are you okay?" His voice was calm, without a hint of hesitation. I sat still in my chair, the phone on the table, still open to the photos from the cabin. He glanced at it, his eyes lingering for a second before he looked away. The corner of his mouth twitched, not with surprise, not with remorse. It was a calculated look, as if he were deciding how much to say and how much to hide. "You saw them?" he asked, his voice dropping slightly. I gave a small nod, my voice cold and dry. "The cabin was really crowded, but just crowded enough for Danielle to sit next to you." A silence fell over the room. He took a breath and sat in the chair across from me. "I didn't know she was coming. It was Sam's decision. I didn't want to make a scene." I looked him straight in the eye. "Didn't want to make a scene? Or didn't want to miss an opportunity?" He frowned, his voice rising. "You're misunderstanding. It was just a weekend. It was nothing." I let out a small, bitter laugh. My finger touched the screen, to the photo of him pulling out a chair for Danielle. "Nothing, but you did something for her you've never done for me." He was about to object, but then the phone in his pocket buzzed. He pulled it out, and I could clearly see the message on the screen. "Thanks for letting me come. I miss you so much, Catharia, Danielle." The room seemed to freeze. He quickly turned off the screen, but it was too late. I looked at him, my expression blank. He avoided my gaze, his body rigid. How are you going to explain this? My voice was firm, sharp as a knife. He took a breath, his voice cracking. She just sent that. It's nothing. I tilted my head, my eyes never leaving his face. Stop lying. I'm not blind. He shot up from his chair, his voice harsh. You're always overthinking things. What more do you want? Do you want me to cut off my entire family because of your insecurities? I stood up too, but my voice was low, cold, and calm. I don't need you to cut off your family. I just need you to be loyal to my place in your life. But you chose to put someone else in the spot that was supposed to be mine. He was silent, his shoulders slumped, his eyes darting around. For the first time, I saw a flicker of fear on his face. I walked over, bent down, and picked up his bag from the floor, placing it on the table. The hoodie inside fell out the same one I had seen Danielle wearing in the photos. I held it up in front of him. How much longer are you going to lie? He didn't answer. His eyes darkened, his throat moved as if he were trying to find the words, but there were none. I set the hoodie on the table and turned to leave. No screaming, no crying, just a chilling coldness. That night, I didn't sleep in our bed. I went to the living room and lay on the sofa, the dim light from the window casting shadows on the walls. I could hear him pacing, the sound of doors opening and closing, but he never came to me. We were both engulfed in silence. I was no longer the girl who tried to be agreeable to keep the peace. From that moment on, I knew Ethan hadn't just deceived me with his actions. He had deceived me with his silence, with his complicit nod to exclude me from his life and put Danielle back in her place. And in that silence, I understood this was just the surface. I had to find out what was still hidden underneath. After the first confrontation, I didn't press him further. I chose to be silent, to observe his every move, his every glance, his evasive answers, his nervousness when a text message appeared, his shirt on Danielle's shoulders. None of it was the end of the story. I needed a clearer truth. I needed to get to the root of it. The next night, after he had fallen asleep, I quietly went into the living room. His bag from the cabin was still on the table. I opened it and went through it. Tucked between his clothes, I found a few photos that had never been posted online. They were instant prints, the paper still smelling of ink. In one, Ethan was sitting on a couch, and Danielle was leaning against him, her arm around his shoulders, while he was looking down at her, smiling. In another, the whole group was laughing, but it was clear that his leg and hers were touching under the table. I sat there for a long time, looking at the photos. No more explanation was needed. The small details were enough to answer the question I had been avoiding. They had never stopped. Danielle wasn't his past. She had just been temporarily replaced, and I was the one who had been out of place. I didn't scream. I just felt cold. I put the photos in a small envelope and kept them. This would be my proof, and I knew I would need it. The next day, I started to pay more attention to Ethan's behavior. He was still trying to act normal, going to work in the morning, coming home for dinner, sometimes asking a few polite questions. But there was an invisible distance between us, and he knew it. I was different. I no longer wanted to fill the silence with reassurances. I just wanted to see what else he was hiding. One evening, while he was in the shower, I heard his phone buzz. A message from a family group chat. Someone had sent a photo from the cabin. Amidst the laughter of the group, I heard a short audio clip attached. Ethan's voice, deep and clear, saying, "Danielle is the one I really want to introduce to the family." I was speechless. The audio clip wasn't long, but it was enough to shatter my last remaining hopes. I saved it, didn't delete it. This was the piece I needed. That night, I didn't lie beside him. I sat in the living room, the lights off, the phone screen glowing in my hand. I replayed the audio clip several times to make sure I wasn't mishearing. Every time his voice came on, my heart clenched, but my mind grew clearer. The next day, I called an old friend who worked at a law firm. I didn't go into detail, just asked a few hypothetical questions. If, in a long-term relationship, one person was hiding assets and the other was unfaithful, what kind of evidence would be admissible? My friend advised, if this is real, don't let your emotions take over. Keep all the evidence, the clearer the better. When the time is right, you'll know how to use it. I nodded. I knew this was advice for me, not just a hypothetical. A few days later, while cleaning out a shared file cabinet, I happened to find an old envelope. Inside were bank statements for an account I had never seen before. The balance wasn't huge, but it had been regularly deposited into every month for the past 2 years. When I had asked, Ethan had said his income had decreased because of a slow period at work. Now I understood. The money hadn't disappeared. He had just kept it separate, hidden from me. I held the envelope, my hands shaking. Not from surprise, but from certainty. Everything was connected. Danielle, the photos, the audio clip, the secret account. He had been planning this. I had never truly been a part of the picture he and his family had created. That evening, I decided to test him. How have you been lately? How's your income? He froze for a moment, then forced a smile. It's been okay, not much. I looked at him, my eyes cold. Really? He avoided my gaze and turned on the television. His silence was no longer a clumsy attempt to hide something. It was an admission. If anyone is listening to this, you probably understand the feeling when the truth is revealed layer by layer. It doesn't crash down on you all at once like a storm, but seeps in, cold and certain. If you have ever experienced the small signs, only to realize a whole picture of betrayal was behind them, please share your story in the comments. Maybe your story will be a wake-up call for someone who is still turning a blind eye. I asked myself, had I been silent for too long, or had I never really been heard? But then, I decided, from now on, my silence would no longer be a defense. It would be my weapon. I saved everything. The photos, the audio clips, the documents. I organized them carefully, keeping a separate copy. Not a single confrontation, not a single argument, just preparation. In Ethan's eyes, I was probably just growing distant, but he didn't know that with every step, I was turning that distance into evidence, into a plan. And when I finally laid everything in front of him, there would be no room for denial. I no longer let myself fall into a state of waiting. Waiting for him to confess, waiting for his family to change, waiting for a justice that would never come. I started to make a plan, and this time, I would be the one in control. I met with Allison, my old friend from the law firm, again. I didn't tell her every detail, just asked what seemed like theoretical questions. She looked at me for a long time and then said, "If this is real, don't let your emotions take over. Keep all the evidence, the clearer the better. When the time is right, you'll know how to use it." I nodded. I knew this was advice for me, not just a hypothetical. From that day on, I started documenting everything. Every text, every gesture, every sign was saved. I kept a separate copy, carefully and discreetly. Every night, when Ethan was asleep, I would sit in the living room, the yellow light illuminating the file that was growing thicker by the day. I no longer confronted him. Instead, I watched him with a cold detachment. He could feel the silence, and it made him uncomfortable. One night, he snapped, "You've become a stranger. What are you trying to do?" I looked him straight in the eye and said simply, "I'm learning to hold on to what's important." He was speechless, his expression hardening, and then he turned away. Once, I heard him talking on the phone with Ava in the kitchen. I stood behind the door, silent. His voice was low but clear enough. "You know, Danielle is the one who really fits in with the family. She just makes everything more complicated." I closed my eyes. I no longer felt pain. I just felt a confirmation. Everything I had suspected was now true. I quietly turned on my phone's recorder and saved the entire conversation. That night, I didn't sleep. I organized the evidence into sections: the cabin photos, the audio clip of him saying she was the one he wanted to introduce, the secret bank account, the call with Ava. Each was a piece of the puzzle. And I knew that when I put them all together, they would create a picture he couldn't break. I also started to prepare financially. I opened a separate bank account and quietly transferred my salary into it. I didn't take anything from him. I just kept what was mine. I needed independence, a solid escape route. Every day, I still went to work, still came home, still cooked dinner, but in my heart, I was no longer a woman waiting for love. I was a woman building an escape plan and a counterattack. Ethan looked at me and saw my distance, but he had no idea that I was already several steps ahead of him. One evening, he tried to win me over by bringing home my favorite food. He set it on the table with a note. "We need to talk." I looked at the food, at the note, and then walked straight into my room. Not a word. He called after me, his voice heavy. "You're being cruel." I turned back, and for the first time, I didn't hold back the sharpness in my voice. "Cruel would be showing all of this to your mother. Cruel would be letting your whole family know what you said about me. But I haven't done that, so don't use that word with me." He was stunned. His face was pale, his eyes wide. In that moment, I realized he had no idea how much I had on him. And his own naivety was my advantage. If you're listening to this story and have ever had to prepare in silence, ever had to keep every piece of evidence while waiting to turn the tables, you understand that feeling of cold resolve. Please subscribe to the channel so that when I tell the rest, you can witness every step I took to regain power in my own life. I knew this game wasn't over. I was just getting started. I chose a Saturday morning when Ethan was out getting the car washed. He had no idea I had been up earlier, preparing everything. In my purse was the file, the cabin photos, the audio clips, the bank statements, and above all, I carried the silence that had been tormenting him for weeks, now turned into a weapon. I drove straight to Linda's house, Ethan's mother. The house was bright, the smell of baking wafting out onto the porch. In the yard, Ava was setting up a table for a weekend brunch. When I walked in, they both froze. Linda's eyes were flustered, and Ava frowned, her hands pausing on a tablecloth. What are you doing here?" Linda's voice was unsteady. I didn't answer right away. I pulled out my phone and opened a photo. Ethan and Danielle in a car, her head on his shoulder, his hand casually resting on her thigh. I held the screen up for them to see, without a word of explanation, without a single tear. Linda's face went pale, her lips moving but no sound coming out. Ava turned away, avoiding my gaze, her hands clenching the cloth. I continued, my voice cold and dry. "This is the person you all called family forever. This is the real reason I was excluded from the cabin. Because in your eyes, my place never existed." The air was thick. The clatter of silverware in the kitchen stopped. The room was filled with a suffocating silence. I pressed play on the audio clip. Ethan's voice, deep and clear, filled the small kitchen. "Danielle is the one I really want to introduce to the family." The sound echoed in the room. Linda covered her mouth, her eyes wide, while Ava took a step back, avoiding my gaze. No one could say a word. I turned off the phone and put it back in my purse. I looked directly at them. "I don't need an explanation. I just want you to see the truth you've been helping him hide for so long." I didn't wait for a reaction. I turned and walked to the door, my voice firm and final. "If this is what you call family, then I understand why I never belonged." The sunlight in the yard was harsh, but I didn't blink. I got in my car and drove straight home. On the kitchen table, I had left the file and a single piece of paper. On it was a printout of the text Danielle had sent. "Thanks for letting me come. I miss you so much, Karna." I had underlined it in red and then handwritten a note. "You said the cabin had no room for me, but you had room for her. So from now on, my life has no room for you." When Ethan came home, I was already gone. He would walk into the kitchen, see the file, hear the silence, and know that the game was over. I didn't just disappear after leaving. I was silent, letting Ethan confront the truth. But I knew that wouldn't be enough. A man like him would try to deny it, to salvage what he could. I needed to make sure that when this door closed, there would be no cracks for him to slip through. 2 days later, I met with my own lawyer. I gave her everything. The cabin photos, the audio clips, the text messages, the secret bank account. She looked through it all and nodded slowly. "This isn't just a simple breakup. With this evidence, we can file a civil suit for the division of joint assets acquired during your time together and seek damages for his fraudulent concealment of assets." I signed the authorization form, my voice firm, not trembling. "I want everything to be clear. I will not let him walk away looking innocent." The lawsuit was filed. Immediately, the secret bank account was frozen by a court order. Ethan had no idea until he received the official notice. That day, he called me 5 times, his voice a mix of anger and panic. I didn't answer. I saved every message he left, in case I needed them. His family began to fracture. I heard from a mutual friend that Linda was no longer defending Ethan. Ava had unfollowed him and deleted his photos from her social media. They didn't take my side, but their silence toward him was an admission. They couldn't continue to defend him. Danielle disappeared from their circle. The people who had once raised a glass to family forever were now silent, leaving him in an empty space. One evening, Ethan showed up at my door. He was holding flowers, his voice low. "We can still save this." I was wrong, but not everything was wrong. I stood in the doorway, the warm yellow light illuminating his haggard face. I replied simply, coldly, "You had 2 lives, one with me and one with her. You tried to keep them both. Now you have neither." He was trembling, trying to hand me the bouquet. I didn't take it. I closed the door, leaving him standing in the empty hallway. In the following weeks, my lawyer updated me on our progress. We requested to keep the car that was in both our names, citing that I was the primary user and had clear records. We also filed a claim regarding the income he had diverted for 2 years, asking the court to treat it as a deliberate concealment of joint assets. Ethan fought back. He hired his own lawyer and tried to argue that the secret account was just savings for our shared future. But the text messages, the cabin photos, the audio clip of him admitting his feelings for Danielle, it all destroyed his story. No one believed in the shared savings anymore. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt a cold, quiet peace spreading through me. I didn't need to scream, didn't need to prove myself with tears. I just needed the evidence, and the truth did the rest. If you have followed me this far, you probably understand one thing. Justice doesn't come from begging or hoping someone will change. It comes from daring to take the truth and turn it into your strength. If you can relate, please leave a comment. I want to know how you would choose to stand up when you've been pushed out like I was. When the first hearing ended, I walked out of the courtroom. Ethan was sitting in the back, his head bowed, his earlier confidence gone. His lawyer was shaking his head in disappointment. I didn't look back a second time. I didn't need to. I knew that things weren't officially over, but from that moment on, the tide had turned. And for the first time in years, I no longer felt like an outsider in my own story. I was the one rewriting the ending. 3 months later, the case was closed. The papers were finalized, the signatures stamped, and all ties were officially severed. I walked out of the courthouse. The wind was cold, but my heart was light. There was no more room for lies, no more of his family's averted gazes. Ethan had fought until the very end. He had shown up at every hearing looking disheveled, repeating over and over that we can still save this. But the photos, the audio clips, the financial records had stripped away his mask. The court ruled to keep the car in my name and to divide the money in the secret account. He had not only lost me, but he had also lost the things he had tried to hide. His family no longer stood by him. Ava had cut off contact, and Linda refused all his calls. They never apologized to me, but their silence toward him was an admission. They had been wrong to be complicit. Danielle had vanished from the picture. The people who had once toasted to old times no longer mentioned her name. One afternoon, as I was leaving work, Ethan appeared in front of the building. He was holding a bouquet of roses, his eyes pleading. "I know I was wrong. We can start over. You're still my fiancé. You're still my family." I looked at him, no longer feeling anger or pain, just an emptiness, and a certainty that had been etched deep inside me. I replied simply, coldly, "You had 9 years to choose me, and in all those 9 years, you never did." He stood frozen, his hands clutching the flowers. I turned and walked back inside. Not a single glance back. That evening, I posted a photo. A picture of me in a bridal shop, trying on a simple white dress. The caption was short, "Finally free to choose me." The photo received hundreds of shares from friends, from people who had witnessed our relationship. No one asked any questions. They understood. If you have ever been pushed to the side, been replaced, been deceived by the person you trusted most, you will understand that feeling of liberation. Please subscribe to the channel to hear more stories like this. because maybe one day you'll need to hear that you are not alone. Ethan lost everything. He no longer had me, no longer had his family's support, no longer had the assets he had hidden. All he had left were old memories, toasts that no one wanted to remember. I, on the other hand, had myself back. Not by screaming, not by begging, but with a silence so cold it made the truth reveal itself. They had once said the cabin had no room for me, but now I understood. My life never had room for lies, and I had closed that door forever.